Jamaica After Dark. The Woman Who Never Came Out. Stories we grew up hearing, Episode 1. Some stories are ancient. Some happened last year. Based on a true account from Jamaica. Names, locations, and identifying details are fictionalized. The Woman Who Never Came Out. Some stories in Jamaica have been passed down for generations. Others happened so recently that the witnesses are still trying to understand what they saw. This true account reached me from a quiet community in Jamaica through people close to those involved. The names and a few identifying details have been changed to protect their privacy, but the central event happened as described. Several people watched an unfamiliar woman enter a friend's house. They waited for her to come back out. She never did. And when they contacted the woman who lived there, her response made everything even stranger. Nobody had entered her house. For this retelling, I will call the homeowner Miss Lorna. The story began on an ordinary evening, before the district had gone fully dark. Her house stood a little way back from the road, painted pale green, with white window grills and a narrow veranda shaded by a breadfruit tree. Across from it was Miss Pearl's small shop. 2 doors farther down, for men had pulled a domino table close to the roadside, where the last of the daylight still reached them. A radio played somewhere behind the houses. Pots knocked against kitchen counters. A motorcycle climbed the hill, its engine rising and falling around the bends. Nothing about the evening warned anyone to go inside early. At about 20 minutes to 8, Miss Pearl noticed a woman walking toward the shop. She was perhaps 50 years old, although Pearl later said there was something about her face that made age difficult to judge. She wore a dusty blue dress that fell below her knees, low gray shoes, and a small brown handbag held neatly in front of her with both hands. Her hair was pinned back. Her clothes were clean but old-fashioned, as if she had dressed for church many years earlier and somehow stepped into the wrong decade. Pearl had lived in that district for more than 30 years. She knew the people who lived there, their relatives, and most of the visitors who came often enough to stop asking for directions. She had never seen this woman before. "Evening, miss," Pearl called. The woman turned her head and looked directly at her. She did not answer. She gave one small nod, then continued toward Lorna's gate. At that same moment, Andre came around the bend on his motorcycle. His headlights swept across the road and caught the woman as she stepped from one side to the other. Andre braked and put one foot on the ground to let her pass. Later, he would insist that he saw her clearly. He saw the handbag. He saw the gray shoes. He saw a thin mark running from the corner of her left eye toward her cheek. She was no shadow mistaken for a person. She was a woman close enough for him to apologize when his motorcycle came near her. "Sorry, Ma," he said. She looked at him, but she did not speak. The men at the domino table looked up when Andre's engine dropped to an idle. One of them, Lennox, watched the stranger lift the latch on Lorna's gate. Another saw the blue hem of her dress brush against the croton plants lining the walkway. The gate made its usual long squeak. The woman walked to the veranda. She climbed both steps without hurrying. Then she reached Lorna's front door. From across the road, Pearl saw the woman raise one hand. Whether she knocked or touched the door, Pearl could not say. The doorway darkened for a moment, and the woman moved forward. Then she was inside. Nobody found that unusual at first. Visitors came. Neighbors stopped by. People delivered messages instead of sending them. The domino game continued. Andre restarted his motorcycle, but remained at the shop to buy a drink. Pearl served 2 customers and glanced at Lorna's house only once or twice. Nearly half an hour passed. Pearl had a covered bowl that belonged to Lorna, so she decided to carry it across the road. As she opened the gate, she noticed that the front door was closed. She called from the walkway. "Lorna, your visitor gone already?" Lorna answered from inside. "What visitor?" Pearl laughed because she thought Lorna was joking. She climbed the veranda steps and held up the bowl. "The lady in the blue dress. She just come in here." Lorna did not laugh. She opened the door only as far as the safety chain allowed and stared at Pearl through the gap. "Pearl, nobody come in this house from 6 o'clock. The bowl almost slipped from Pearl's hand. The safety chain was still fastened from the inside. Pearl called Andre. The men abandoned their dominoes. Within minutes, the little veranda held more people than it comfortably could. Everyone spoke at once until Lorna raised her voice and demanded that they stop frightening her. Andre described the blue dress. Lennox described the brown handbag. Pearl mentioned the pinback hair. Garfield, who had said very little, quietly added that the woman's left shoe seemed to drag slightly when she walked. They had not discussed those details before entering the yard. Lorna unhooked the chain and let them search. It was not a large house. The front room opened into a short passage with 2 bedrooms on one side and the kitchen at the end. The back door was bolted. A wooden chair sat beneath its handle, exactly where Lorna placed it each evening. Every window was shut behind metal grills. There was no open cellar, no ceiling hatch, and no second staircase for a person to use unseen. They looked beneath the beds. They opened the wardrobe and pulled back the shower curtain. Andre checked the yard, the breadfruit tree, and the narrow space between the house and the boundary wall. There was no woman. Nothing had been stolen. Nothing appeared disturbed. But Lorna had experienced something at the exact time the witnesses said the stranger entered. She had been sitting in the front room folding clothes while the television played. Without warning, the sound disappeared. The picture remained, but every voice went silent. Lorna pressed the remote. Nothing happened. Then she heard 3 slow footsteps in the passage behind her. She assumed something had fallen or a cat had reached the back veranda, although she did not own one. Before she could stand, the room filled with the scent of old-fashioned lavender powder. It was the kind her grandmother used when Lorna was a child. The smell lasted only a few seconds. The television sound returned. Lorna checked the passage and found nothing there. She had decided not to trouble herself over it. Now, surrounded by neighbors insisting that a woman had entered her locked house, she began to tremble. Pearl asked whether Lorna knew anyone who dressed the way they had described. Lorna said no. Then she stopped. On the wall beside the passage hung a framed photograph of Lorna's mother and 3 aunts taken outside a church many decades earlier. The image had faded to soft browns and grays. One of the women stood at the edge of the group in a knee-length dress, holding a small handbag in both hands. Pearl lifted the frame from the wall and carried it beneath the veranda light. Andre pointed first. That is her. Lennox agreed. So did Garfield. Pearl said nothing for several seconds, then touched the face in the photograph. Same eyes, she whispered. Same mark by the cheek. The woman in the picture was Lorna's grandaunt, Miriam. She had lived in that house long before the front room was extended and the veranda tiled. She had died when Lorna was a small child, too young to remember her clearly. Lorna stared at the photograph and asked the question nobody could answer. Why she come here now? No warning followed. No family member died that night. No buried object was discovered beneath the floor. The house did not burn, and Lorna did not fall ill. The stranger left no message that anyone could understand. That may be the most unsettling part. We like supernatural stories to explain themselves. We want every spirit to arrive with a warning, a secret, or unfinished business. But Jamaican Duppy stories have never promised us that kind of comfort. Sometimes the dead are said to return because they are restless. Sometimes because a familiar place still calls them. And sometimes, according to the old people, a Duppy passes through simply because it can. Before everyone left, Andre examined the front gate again. Its latch worked normally. The walkway held no footprints anyone could identify. Miss Pearl's shop camera faced the road, but the breadfruit tree blocked most of Lorna's yard. The recording showed Andre slowing his motorcycle. It showed Pearl turning toward the road. It showed all 4 domino players looking in the same direction at the same moment. The woman herself was hidden behind the tree. So the camera proved nothing, except that 6 living people had reacted to something the lens could not see. When the story reached me, I asked whether the people involved believed the woman was truly Lorna's grandaunt. The answer came back carefully. Nobody was claiming to know who, or what, the woman was. They were only repeating what 6 people said they saw. Then came one final warning. But if you're driving on a lonely road at night and one strange woman asks you for a ride, do not stop to find out. The conversation ended, but the story did not. People in the district still talk about the woman in blue. Some believe the witnesses frighten one another into remembering the same details. Some say a real visitor must have slipped out unnoticed. Others refuse to pass Lorna's gate alone after dark. Lorna still lives in the house. The photograph of Miriam no longer hangs beside the passage. Lorna placed it inside a drawer, face up, wrapped carefully in a clean white cloth. And she never again dismissed the scent of lavender powder. Some Jamaican stories are hundreds of years old. Others are born under electric light, in front of motorcycles, security cameras, and people carrying mobile phones. Folklore is not always something we inherit from the past. Sometimes it happens last year. Sometimes several people watch it walk through a front door. And sometimes the house never gives it back. If your family has a Jamaican story that nobody has ever been able to explain, share it in the comments. It may become part of Jamaica After Dark, stories we grew up hearing. Until next time, when darkness falls in Jamaica, listen carefully. The island remembers.